Good afternoon. We're breaking into programming with a special report out of the Chicago area. Michael David McKe, the man accused of killing a couple.
Just months before the murders, a lawsuit was quietly filed in Las Vegas. Not a headline, not a breaking news alert, not something the public knew about. It happened in the shadows. And at the same time, Michael McKe disappeared. Vanished from his workplace, stopped answering calls, stopped showing up. Even his own colleagues didn't know where he went. While everyone was focused on who Michael McKe was becoming, what he was doing in Chicago, where he was working, something else was unfolding behind the scenes. A malpractice lawsuit, filed in May 2024, buried inside court records, unnoticed until now. This wasn't a minor complaint. This wasn't a paperwork dispute. It traced back to a medical procedure performed in July 2023. A routine case that a patient seeking treatment, trusting a surgeon with their body. But according to the lawsuit, something went horribly wrong. A catheter, a simple medical tool, inserted into the patient's body. And then, it snapped. Not bent, not dislodged, snapped. Breaking apart inside the patient, leaving 8.6 inches trapped inside their body. 8.6 inches. Let that sink in. A foreign object, lodged internally, causing pain, complications, emergency intervention. The lawsuit claims the procedure was partially performed by a physician assistant, someone working under Michael McKe. And according to the complaint, McKe failed to properly train them, failed to supervise, failed to ensure safety, which made him legally responsible. This wasn't about a simple mistake. This was about accountability, about professional duty, about a surgeon's obligation to protect patients. And suddenly, a new picture begins to form. Because this lawsuit, it wasn't resolved. It was still active, still hanging over him, still unanswered. At the same time he vanished. Right in the months leading up to the murders of Monique and Spencer. Think about that timing. A career-threatening legal case, a potential stain on his professional record, a surgeon's reputation on the line. Everything he worked for, under threat. And then, he disappears. No forwarding address, no explanation, no public trace. And yet, none of this was public knowledge, no press coverage, no warnings, no headlines. It stayed buried, quiet, hidden, until now. Which raises a chilling question. What was happening inside Michael McKe's mind during those months? Was he under pressure? Was he panicking? Was he running? Was he watching his carefully built career start to crumble? Because when people begin to lose control, they don't always lose it loudly. Sometimes, they vanish. They retreat. They hide, they unravel quietly. And this lawsuit may be the first crack in the image he worked so hard to build. A hidden chapter, a secret storm, brewing beneath the surface. While the world saw a successful surgeon, court documents tell a different story. One of stress, fear, avoidance, and consequences. And when that kind of pressure collides with unresolved emotions from the past, the result can be explosive. Because this wasn't just a lawsuit. This was a warning sign. One no one saw coming. Until now. Before we delve into this story, take a quick second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find these investigations, and you'll stay updated as new information continues to emerge. To understand why this lawsuit matters, we have to go inside the procedure itself. The patient suffered from a condition known as venous insufficiency. It's a circulatory disorder. A problem where the veins in the legs struggle to push blood back up to the heart. Blood pools. Pressure builds. Pain sets in. For some patients, it becomes unbearable. Swelling, aching, heaviness. So they seek help. And in July 2023, this patient did exactly that. They went to Las Vegas Surgical Associates, a professional clinic, staffed by trained medical personnel, including Michael McKe, a vascular surgeon. Someone trusted to fix exactly this type of problem. The goal of the procedure? To improve blood flow, to relieve pressure, to stop the pain. A minimally invasive treatment. Something done every day in medical offices across the country. But according to the lawsuit, this wasn't done by McKe himself. A physician assistant performed part of the procedure. Someone working under his supervision. And this is where things go wrong. The PA allegedly inserted a catheter. A thin tube used to access veins. But the lawsuit claims it was inserted incorrectly. The angle, the pressure, the placement, something was off. And then, the unthinkable happened. The catheter broke. Inside the patient's body. Not at the surface. Not where it could be easily removed. Inside. Leaving behind 8.6 inches off tubing. Trapped. Lodged. Embedded. The patient didn't just feel discomfort. They experienced severe pain. Panic. Confusion. Something was wrong. Doctors realized quickly this wasn't routine. This wasn't minor. They had to act fast. Emergency treatment followed. The patient was rushed for further medical care. Because a foreign object inside the body can lead to infection, internal bleeding, nerve damage, long-term complications. This wasn't a bruise. This wasn't soreness. This was trauma. Physical. Emotional. The lawsuit describes ongoing pain, extended recovery, fear, medical uncertainty, and all of it from a procedure that was supposed to help them. Now here's the critical part. Michael McKe didn't personally insert the catheter. But according to the lawsuit, that doesn't matter, because he was responsible for training that PA, responsible for supervision, responsible for safety protocols. In medicine, the supervising doctor holds the weight. When something goes wrong, it comes back to them, which is why his name appears in bold in that lawsuit. Not as a side note, not as a witness, but as a defendant. This wasn't a random accident. This wasn't a fluke. The lawsuit alleges inadequate training, poor oversight, failure to prevent harm. And suddenly, the image of the flawless surgeon starts to crack. Because this wasn't just a mistake. This was a breakdown in responsibility. And it happened just months before two people would lose their lives in Ohio. A timeline that now feels impossible to ignore. Because pressure does something to people. Especially when everything they worked for is suddenly in danger. And this incident was the spark. The moment his professional world started shaking. Whether anyone saw it or not. So why was Michael McKe named in this lawsuit? Why wasn't it only the physician assistant? Why did the legal spotlight land on him? The answer lies in how medicine actually works. In hospitals and clinics, there is a hierarchy, a chain of responsibility. At the top stands the supervising physician. In this case, Michael McKe. The lawsuit claims he was the doctor assigned to oversee that procedure. He wasn't just another name on the staff list. He was the authority, the one responsible for training, oversight, safety, decision-making. According to the complaint, the physician assistant who inserted the catheter worked under McKe's supervision, which means he trained them. He evaluated their skills. He approved their ability to perform that task. In medicine, you don't just hand someone equipment and hope for the best. You certify them. You watch them. You correct them. You step in when something feels off. That's the job. That's the responsibility. And the lawsuit alleges McKe failed at that. Failed to ensure the assistant knew exactly what they were doing. Failed to supervise during the procedure. Failed to prevent a catastrophic mistake. So when the catheter snapped, when 8.6 inches remained trapped inside a patient, the blame didn't stop with the person holding the tool. It climbed the ladder, straight to the top, to the doctor in charge. That's how accountability works in medicine. If a nurse makes a mistake, the supervising physician answers. If a resident errs, the attending physician answers. If a physician assistant fails, the supervising surgeon answers. Because the law sees it this way. You are only allowed to perform what your supervisor authorizes. And if you are not properly trained, that's not your fault. That's your supervisor's. So legally, Michael McKe carried the weight. Not emotionally. Not morally. Legally. The lawsuit claims he breached the standard of care. That he didn't meet the professional expectations of a supervising surgeon. And that breach led directly to harm, to pain, to trauma, to emergency treatment, which is why his name appears as a defendant. Not optional, not symbolic, but central, because in the eyes of the court, he was the gatekeeper, the final checkpoint, the person who was supposed to say, "No, not yet. You need more training. I'll handle this part. Stop." But according to the lawsuit, that never happened. And here's what makes this even heavier. Michael McKe wasn't a new doctor. He wasn't fresh out of school. He wasn't learning. He was a vascular surgeon, a specialist, someone who spent over a decade in training, medical school, residency, fellowship. This wasn't beginner territory. This was expert level, which means the expectations were higher, the standards stricter, the responsibility greater. So when something went wrong, The fall was harder. Because a surgeon doesn't just operate on bodies. They carry trust. Patient trust. Institution trust. Public trust. And when that trust is broken, it doesn't just hurt reputations. It changes lives. The lawsuit claims exactly that. That McKe's failure to supervise was not a minor oversight, but a serious lapse that caused real harm. And now, this detail changes everything. Because this wasn't a small crack in his career. This was a fracture. A moment where the system said, you may have failed. And for someone who built their entire identity around being successful, respected, admired, that kind of accusation cuts deep. Especially when it threatens medical licenses, hospital privileges, future employment. Everything. Which brings us back to the timing. This lawsuit wasn't ancient history. It wasn't resolved. It was active. Ongoing. Hanging over him. Just months before Monique and Spencer were killed. A professional crisis. Colliding with a personal past. And suddenly, the question isn't just what happened in Ohio. It's what was already breaking inside Michael McKe before he ever got in that car. Because sometimes, people don't snap out of nowhere. Sometimes, they've been cracking for a long time. The lawsuit itself was filed in May 2024. Quietly. No cameras.no headlines.no media frenzy. Just paperwork. Filed in a Las Vegas courtroom with a name typed clearly across the page. Michael David McKe. Not a witness. Not a consultant. A defendant. And the demands were serious. The patient wasn't just asking questions. They were seeking compensation for pain, for medical bills, for trauma. And more than that, accountability. They wanted answers. They wanted to know how a routine procedure turned into a nightmare. How a simple catheter became a life-altering injury. How a trained medical team let something go so wrong. The lawsuit lays it out. Claims of negligence. Failure to supervise. Failure to meet the standard of care. In legal terms, that's heavy. Because this wasn't a Bhutan unpredictable complication. It was about preventable error. About systems that failed. About oversight that didn't happen. And while the legal process moved forward, Michael McKe said nothing publicly. No statements. No explanations. No defense offered to the public. The case remained active, unresolved, open, a cloud over his career. And this part matters. Because when the murders happened in December, that lawsuit was still alive, still pending, still unanswered. It hadn't been dismissed. It hadn't been settled. It hadn't gone away. So while the world would later see him as a suspect in a double homicide, just months earlier, he was already facing serious legal trouble. Professional trouble. The kind of trouble that threatens your reputation, your income, your future. For a surgeon, that's everything. Because medicine isn't just a job. It's a license. A privilege. One accusation can follow you forever. And this one wasn't small. An instrument left inside a patient. A lawsuit claiming negligence. These are the kinds of cases that hospital boards look at. That medical boards review. That insurance companies flag. This wasn't just about money. This was about whether should even be practicing. And yet, there he was. Still working. Still moving between states. Still keeping quiet. While the lawsuit sat in the background. Like a ticking clock. And now, looking back, the timing feels eerie. A legal battle. A professional crisis. Then suddenly, a violent crime. 2 people dead. The same man at the center. Which forces an uncomfortable question. Was he already unraveling? Was he under pressure no one else could see? Because this lawsuit wasn't resolved. It was waiting. Just like everything else that would soon catch up to him. And when life starts closing in, when the walls get tighter, some people fight. Some people run. And some make decisions that change everything forever. This lawsuit may have been the first domino. Then something happened that made this lawsuit even more disturbing. Michael McKe didn't respond. He didn't show up. He didn't answer. According to court records, there were 9 separate attempts to serve him legal papers. 9 chances. 9 opportunities to face the case head-on. And every single time, he was gone. The first attempt happened on September 30th, 2025. Exactly 3 months before Monique and Spencer would be murdered. The process server arrived early. Morning hours. A normal residential visit. They knocked. No answer. Silence. But it didn't end there. The very next day, the process server returned. Mid-morning. This time, they heard a television playing inside the house. Someone was home. So they knocked again, and again, and again. Then suddenly, the TV shut off. Silence. No footsteps. No door opening. No response. Someone was inside, listening, but refusing to answer. Think about that moment. A grown man, a respected surgeon, standing behind a door, hearing someone knock, knowing exactly why they're there, and choosing to stay silent, to hide, to pretend he wasn't home. Days passed. More attempts. Same result. No response. Then, the process server tried another approach. They contacted his workplace, Las Vegas Surgical Associates. They spoke with a colleague, another doctor, and what he said was chilling. He just disappeared. No notice. No goodbye. No explanation. One day he was there. The next, gone. No forwarding address. No calls. No emails. Just vanished. This wasn't a vacation. This wasn't a scheduled move. This was abrupt, sudden, unprofessional, and incredibly suspicious, especially for a surgeon, someone with patience, responsibilities, cases in progress. Doctors don't just vanish, not without consequences. But McKe did. And it gets worse. Court documents show the address given for him was fake, not outdated, not mistaken. Fake. A dead end. When process servers went there, the woman who answered the door said, "He doesn't live here, I don't know him." So now, we have a pattern. Avoiding service. Turning off the TV. Fake addresses. Colleagues saying they don't know where he is. And another bombshell. His Nevada medical license expired in June 2025, just months before these service attempts. Which means, he was no longer authorized to practice in that state. So he wasn't just hiding from a lawsuit. He was operating in legal gray areas, possibly without proper credentials. And this is where it becomes a major red flag. Because professionals don't behave this way. Surgeons don't vanish. They don't dodge lawsuits. They don't give fake addresses. They don't ghost their own colleagues. Unless they're running. Running from consequences. Running from accountability. Running from something they don't want to face. And this happened right before the murders. Not years earlier. Not long ago. 3 months before. Which forces the question. What was he afraid of? What was he trying to avoid? What did he think would happen if those papers reached his hands? Because once you're served, you can't ignore it. You have to respond. You have to answer. And McKe didn't want that. So he disappeared. And when someone starts running, it rarely ends well. Because you can only hide for so long. Eventually, everything catches up. And in this case, it may have already begun. By this point, the picture becomes impossible to ignore. Michael McKe didn't just leave his practice. He vanished from it. No resignation letter. No farewell emails. No transition plan for patients. No handoff of cases. One day, he was a vascular surgeon seeing patients. The next, he was gone. Colleagues were blindsided. No one knew where he went. No one knew why. No forwarding address. No phone call. No explanation. In medicine, that almost never happens. Surgeons don't just walk away. They have obligations. Patients mid-treatment. Follow-up appointments. Medical records. Legal responsibilities. When a doctor leaves a practice, there's usually formal notice, credential transfers, hospital paperwork, board notifications. None of that happened here. He simply disappeared. And that raised alarms. Even attorneys involved in the malpractice case were confused. Process servers couldn't find him. Lawyers couldn't contact him. His own workplace didn't know where he was. Think about how unusual that is. This wasn't a junior staffer. This was a specialist. A surgeon in the prime of his career. Someone with years of training. Someone hospitals invest in. And yet, no one could locate him. Then another troubling detail emerged. According to court filings, there was no malpractice insurance listed for him in Nevada. For a surgeon, that's unheard of. Doctors are required to carry insurance. Hospitals demand it. Clinics verify it. You don't operate without it. It protects patients. It protects the hospital. It protects the doctor. But in this case, there was nothing. No policy number. No insurer. No coverage. Which left attorneys stunned. How could a surgeon practicing without insurance? How could a medical group allow that? Why did no one notice? The questions piled up. and no one had answers. Lawyers said it was extremely unusual, highly concerning, almost unheard of. Everything about this situation was wrong. And suddenly, that spotless career started to crumble. Because this wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. It was a pattern. Dodging legal service, giving fake addresses, letting his license expire, disappearing from work.no insurance. It all pointed to one thing. Unraveling. A man losing control of the world he built. A professional collapse happening in real time. And here's what makes it chilling. This wasn't happening years before the murders. It was happening right before them. While he was relocating, changing states, starting over. Almost like he was resetting his life. Wiping the slate clean. But you can't outrun your past. Especially not in the digital age. Paper trails exist. Court records remain. People remember. And now, all of it is coming back. The lawsuit. The disappearance. The license expiration. The professional chaos. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a breakdown. Slow. Quiet. Hidden. Until it wasn't. And when someone loses their professional identity, their stability, their sense of control, the fallout can be devastating. Because for Michael McKe, being a surgeon wasn't just a job. It was his entire identity. And when that identity started collapsing, something inside him may have collapsed too. A storm brewing. Out of sight. Until it finally exploded. Now step back and look at the calendar. Because timing changes everything. The first attempt to serve Michael McKe with legal papers happened on September 30th, 2025. Exactly 3 months before Monique and Spencer were murdered in their home. Not a coincidence. Not distant history. Not years apart. 3 months. That's the distance between a lawsuit chasing him and a double homicide. Think about what his life looked like during that window of time. He had a malpractice case hanging over his head, a patient accusing him of negligence. Attorneys trying to track him down, a medical license in Nevada that had expired, a practice he abruptly abandoned. Everything he worked for. Threatened. A surgeon's worst nightmare. Because when your career is your identity, when it defines your status, your income, your future, losing it feels like losing yourself. And how did he respond? Not by facing it. Not by calling a lawyer. Not by addressing the lawsuit. He ran. He avoided. He disappeared. Turning off televisions. Ignoring knocks. Giving fake addresses. Ghosting colleagues. Leaving states. Starting over. This wasn't random behavior. It was a pattern. Avoidance. Every problem, he tried to outrun. Every consequence, he tried to dodge. And when people run like that, it's usually because of theory overwhelmed. Afraid. Cornered. Under pressure. Legal trouble does that. Especially when it threatens professional licenses, hospital privileges, future employment. A malpractice suit isn't just about money. It's about reputation. It's about medical boards. It's about whether you're allowed to keep practicing. For a surgeon, that's existential. And now imagine this. You're already under that pressure. Already hiding. Already lying about where you live. Already watching your career unravel. And then, old emotions resurface. An ex-wife. A past relationship. A life she moved on from. A new husband. Children. A happiness you no longer have. 2 worlds colliding. Professional collapse. Personal resentment. At the same time. That's a dangerous mix. Stress doesn't always show itself. Sometimes it stays quiet. Buried. Until it boils over. And when it does, the result can be catastrophic. Because people under extreme pressure don't always think rationally. They fixate. They spiral. They obsess. They lose perspective. And what we see here is a man already running from one crisis, when another storm may have hit him. A storm from his past. And now, that timeline feels haunting. September. He's dodging lawsuits. December. 2 people are dead. 3 months. That's the bridge between professional collapse and alleged violence, which raises a chilling possibility. Was he already unraveling before he ever got in his car? Was his mental state already compromised? Was he feeling trapped? Cornered? Out of options? Because when someone feels like their world is closing in, they don't always make logical choices. Sometimes, they make irreversible ones. And this timeline may be the missing link, the connective tissue between who he was and what he's now accused of becoming. Not proof, not a conclusion, but a pattern, A sequence. Events lining up in a way that feels too precise to ignore. Because this story didn't begin in December. It began months earlier. With a lawsuit. With a knock on a door. With a television going silent. With a man who chose to hide. And everything after that may have been a slow march toward disaster. After disappearing from Las Vegas, Michael McKe resurfaced somewhere new. A different state, a different life, a clean slate. Illinois. Specifically, Chicago. Court records show moved into a luxury condo in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. A high-rise building. Security desk, private amenities, rooftop pool, grills, city views. Not the kind of place you move into by accident. This wasn't hiding in a motel. This was setting up a new chapter. From the outside, it looked like success. A surgeon living in a high-end building in one of Chicago's most desirable areas. But inside, something felt off. Neighbors barely knew him. One resident later said, she met him once. On the pool deck. A polite conversation. Small talk. Welcome to the building. That was it. No friendships. No gatherings. No visitors. They would pass each other in elevators. Exchange quick hellos. Nothing more. No personal stories. No sense of connection. He was alone. Often alone. For months. People who lived around him described him as quiet. Reserved. Kept to himself. Never loud. Never social. Just there. Existing. Almost invisible. And during this time, he had a new job. Working at OSF St. Anthony Medical Center in Rockford, Illinois. About an hour and a half west of Chicago. A long commute. Daily. Back and forth. Chicago to Rockford. Rockford to Chicago. Miles of empty highway. Hours alone in a car. Day after day. Think about that. A man already running from his past. Spending hours alone with his thoughts. No friends nearby. No visible support system. No one checking in. Just work. Drive. Home. Repeat. A routine that feels quiet on the surface, but can be deafening inside. Because isolation does something to people. Especially people already under pressure. Already hiding. Already avoiding legal trouble. Already watching their career wobble. This move to Illinois wasn't just about a new job. It looked like a reset. New city, new apartment, new coworkers, new life. But you can't escape yourself. No matter how far you go. And while neighbors saw a polite surgeon, what they didn't see was what he carried with him. The lawsuit. The disappearance. The fake addresses. The expired license. The stress. The secrets. All of it. Packed into that condo. Behind a closed door. And this is where it gets chilling. Because from this quiet life, from this isolated routine, police now say, he allegedly made a decision that changed everything. A long drive. Across state lines. Back to Ohio. Back to his past. Back to Monique. The woman who had moved on. The woman with a new life. A new husband. Children. A future. And while she was building something, he was living alone. In a city where no one really knew him. Where he had no roots. No community. Just silence. And sometimes, silence is where dark thoughts grow loud. Because on the outside, it looked like he had moved on. But on the inside, something may have been pulling him backward. Toward resentment. Toward obsession. Toward a moment that would change everything. This move to Illinois wasn't an ending. It was a bridge. Between who he used to be, and who he would soon be accused of becoming. A quiet chapter. Before the storm. By now, the pressure on Michael McKe is no longer subtle. It was crushing. A malpractice lawsuit. A disappearing act. An expired medical license. A career built over 15 years suddenly on shaky ground. For someone whose entire identity was tied to being a surgeon, that kind of threat cuts deep. This wasn't just about money. It was about status. Reputation. The image he had spent his whole life constructing. Because in medicine, your name is everything. Once it's questioned, it follows you. Hospitals talk. Medical boards review cases. Insurance companies flag records. One lawsuit can shadow you for the rest of your career. And that fear changes people. Fear of exposure. Fear of losing everything. Fear of being seen as a failure. Especially for someone who, on paper, had always been exceptional. Top student. Award winner. National Merit Scholar. Vascular surgeon. Success was his identity. So what happens when that identity cracks? Experts say, stress doesn't always explode outward. Sometimes it turns inward. Becomes obsession. fixation, control issues, a desperate need to regain power over a life that feels like heights slipping away. And suddenly, the past starts calling. An ex-wife, a relationship that ended without closure, a woman who moved on, found love again, built a family, a life he no longer belonged to. Psychologists often talk about this. When someone feels they are losing control in one part of life, they try to reclaim it somewhere else. Control over memories, over people, over situations they once dominated. It becomes less about love and more about power. Resentment can simmer, quietly, for years, waiting for the right trigger. And according to experts, extreme stress can act as that trigger. Career collapse, legal pressure, isolation, all at once. That's a volatile mix. Not everyone under pressure commits violence. Most don't. But for those already struggling emotionally, already carrying unresolved anger, stress can amplify what's buried. Make it louder, harder to ignore. And remember, Michael McKe was living alone. No close friends nearby. No visible support system. Hours in a car. Silence. Isolation. That's where thoughts grow heavy. That's where resentment has room to breathe. And this is where the question shifts. Not just, what did he do? But, what was happening inside him? Because from the outside, he looked calm, polite, quiet. But inside, experts suggest, he may have been unraveling, afraid, cornered, losing control of the only thing that defined him. And when someone feels their world collapsing, they don't always react rationally. Sometimes, they look for someone to blame, someone from the past, someone who represents what they lost. Happiness, stability, a family. And for Michael McKe, that person may have been Monique. This isn't about justifying, not excusing, not explaining away, but understanding how pressure can twist the human mind, how success can become fragile, how fear can become dangerous. Because by this point, his career was at risk, his reputation was damaged, his future uncertain. And according to investigators, what happened next was a decision that changed everything. One long drive, one irreversible act, and a past that finally caught up with him. Now the story turns from theory to official confirmation. Columbus police made something clear. They classified this case as domestic violence related. That wording matters, because law enforcement doesn't use it lightly. It means investigators believe this wasn't random. Not a robbery, not a stranger, not a crime of opportunity. This was personal, targeted, rooted in a past relationship. Michael McKe, the ex-husband, the connection, the history. Police are saying it out loud now. This wasn't just homicide. It was domestic violence. And that changes how we see everything. The motive, the planning, the target. Then came the next bombshell. Police searched Muck's apartment in Chicago. Inside, they found multiple weapons. Not one, several. And among them, investigators say one weapon is preliminarily linked to the murders. That's huge. This isn't behavioral evidence. This isn't theory. This is physical evidence. Ballistics, forensics, science, metal to metal, bullet to barrel. A possible direct connection between McKe and the crime scene. Police won't yet say what type of weapon, where exactly it was found, when it was purchased. But they confirmed something critical. One of those weapons matches the homicide evidence. That moves this case into a different category. From suspicion to proof. From narrative to science. And then there's the surveillance. Investigators reviewed neighborhood camera footage from the night of the murders. They spotted a figure, walking in a back alley. Dark clothing, hood up, face turned away from security cameras. That person of interest, police now say, was Michael McKe. They tracked his movement across multiple cameras, following him step by step, until he reached a vehicle. And that vehicle was registered to him. The footage shows the car arriving just before the murders, and leaving shortly after. A narrow window, a precise timeline. Police traced that car, all the way back to Illinois, to Rockford, where McKe was living, where he worked, where he was eventually arrested. This wasn't a guess. It wasn't luck. It was data, cameras, license plate readers, timestamps, movement mapping. Technology did what human memory can't. It followed him, frame by frame, street by street, state by state. And when police arrested him, they had more than suspicion. They had video, vehicle tracking, weapons, a forensic link, all connecting back to one person. Michael McKe, the quiet surgeon, the isolated neighbor, the man who disappeared from a lawsuit. Now, the man charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder. Police aren't releasing everything yet. They're holding back, protecting the investigation, protecting their case. But what they have confirmed is already powerful. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. It was targeted, tracked, planned, documented. And now, the pieces are aligning. Surveillance, weapons, vehicle data, all pointing in the same direction, toward one man. And the further this investigation goes, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just about what happened that night. It's about everything that led up to it. The past, the pressure, the unraveling, and now, the evidence. Because when police finally speak, it means they're ready to build a case, brick by brick, and they're just getting started. Now the focus shifts from what happened to what it means, because prosecutors aren't just building a case around evidence. They're building a story, a timeline, a motive, and suddenly, everything fits into a pattern. The malpractice lawsuit, the disappearing act, the fake addresses, the expired license, the sudden move to Illinois. All of it paints a picture, not of a stable man, but of someone running, avoiding, hiding, for months. And prosecutors will use that. They will argue, this wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't impulsive. This was a man already in crisis, already unraveling, already avoiding accountability, which supports one thing: premeditation. A person who runs from problems doesn't suddenly face them. They escalate. They deflect. They look for control. And in this case, prosecutors will argue found that control be returning to his past. To Monique. To a relationship he never truly left behind. A life she built without him. A happiness he didn't have. They'll say, this wasn't about one bad night. This was about resentment, obsession, power. And now, they have a pattern to prove it. Avoiding lawsuits, disappearing from work, lying about his location, ghosting colleagues, moving states, living in isolation. All behaviors that show someone pulling away from reality, from responsibility, from consequences. That pattern will matter in court, because juries don't just weigh evidence. They weigh character. They ask, who is this person? What kind of choices do they make? How do they handle pressure? Do they face problems? Or run from them? And when prosecutors lay out 9 failed service attempts, turning off the TV, fake addresses, colleagues saying he vanished, it doesn't look accidental. It looks deliberate, calculated, deceptive. And that's where character evidence comes in. While not everything can be introduced, certain behaviors may be allowed, especially if they show intent, state of mind, pattern of conduct. And if the court allows it, the jury will hear about how he avoided legal service, how he abandoned his practice, how he vanished without notice, how he kept moving, state to state, city to city, running. And then, they'll hear about the long drive to Ohio, the surveillance footage, the vehicle tracking, the weapon link, and prosecutors will connect it all. They'll say, this is not who someone becomes overnight. This is who he was becoming. They'll argue, the lawsuit was a trigger. The career collapse was pressure. The isolation made it worse. And when old resentment resurfaced, it exploded, in the most violent way possible. Now imagine being a juror. You hear, 2 parents murdered, children left behind, a man tracked by cameras, a weapon linked, and a history of disappearing, of avoiding responsibility, of hiding. How does that feel? What impression does it leave? Jurors are human. They bring their own instincts, their own life experiences, and patterns matter. Consistency matters. Behavior matters. And in this case, the prosecution has a narrative. A man unraveling, a man losing control, a man who chose violence instead of accountability. This chapter of the story is where evidence meets psychology, where data meets behavior, where prosecutors stop asking, did he do it? And start asking, why did he do it? And they believe. They finally have the pieces to answer that. Because this isn't just a murder case anymore. It's a story of collapse, of pressure, of someone running until there was nowhere left to go. And now, he's caught. And everything he tried to escape is standing in front of him, in a courtroom, Waiting. Even with all these pieces, there is still so much we don't know. We don't know what was truly happening inside Michael McKe's mind. What thoughts he carried. What fears kept him awake. What emotions he couldn't control. Was he angry? Was he ashamed? Was he desperate? We don't know. Financial stress is another mystery. Malpractice lawsuits aren't cheap. Legal defense costs money. Settlements can be devastating. Was he struggling financially? Was he drowning in debt? Was he afraid of losing everything worked for? Police haven't said. Court records don't yet reveal the full picture. And then there's insurance. Why was there no malpractice coverage? Was it canceled? Did it lapse? Was it intentional? Was he hiding something? That's still unanswered. There may also be internal disciplinary actions who don't know about. Hospital reviews. Medical board complaints. Peer evaluations. Were there warnings behind the scenes? Were there red flags no one noticed? Or no one spoke about? Right now, those details remain sealed. Hidden. Waiting to be revealed. Because cases like this don't unfold all at once. They unravel slowly. Layer by layer. Truth by truth. And we are still at the beginning. Behind closed doors, a document waits. A sealed probable cause affidavit. Inside it, everything police haven't told us yet. Phone records, location data, surveillance timestamps, witness statements, forensic details. That document could change everything. Once it's unsealed, we'll see how investigators built their case, what evidence they found first, how long they were watching him, what mistakes he may have made, what digital trail he left behind. Because right now, we're only seeing the surface. The digital footprint is still pending. Phone pings, search histories, purchases, movements. All of it will eventually come out. And when it does, the story will get darker, clearer, more disturbing. Because the truth is still unfolding. And this lawsuit may be the missing piece no one saw coming. The crack in the foundation. The moment everything started to fall apart. So stay with this story. Because what comes next will change everything. Before you go, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any updates. Share this story so more people understand what really happened. We will be following every court hearing, every document release, every development in real time. Because this case isn't over. Not even close.